Art is Work, Work is Art is hosted by McGill University, which is physically located in Tiohtià:ke, otherwise known as Montreal, and is situated on the traditional and unceded territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka. This land has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst Indigenous peoples, including the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe nations. We acknowledge and thank the diverse Indigenous peoples whose presence marks this territory on which peoples of the world now gather. I would also like to share an acknowledgement developed by the Feminist Media Studio at Concordia University for our pandemic forms of assembly. While Zoom, a company that has exploded in value during the COVID-19 pandemic, is the technical custodian of the platform on which we gather, this makes us no less occupants of the multiple territories on which we are physically located. So Zoom's headquarters are located on Muwakme Ohlone territory. The Ohlone have historically understood about sustainability, communal societies, giving gifts to those who passed by, and sharing space. Their horizontal organization might inspire different emergent models of peer-to-peer networking in the pandemic than we're enacting here in Zoom. We see Zoom as a platform which connects us and which alienates us from the aims of restitution, justice, and reparation. We will paste a link to this acknowledgement in the chat. So let's start with the thank yous. Art is Work, Work is Art is brought to you by the Lantz Initiative for Excellence in Education in the Arts, which is coordinated by the McGill Faculty of Education, Department of Integrated Studies in Education, Institute for Human Development and Wellbeing, and Participatory Cultures Lab. This initiative is made possible by the generous support of Pauline Smith. And after today's panel, I invite you to watch a short video about Pauline's contributions and this initiative that is posted at the Symposium website and pasted in the chat. The Artist in Residence program has been a cornerstone of the Lantz Initiative for Excellence in Education in the Arts. This two-day symposium features presentations by all 12 of the past residency artists and was organized by the current artist in residence, Dana McLeod. Fantastic, bravo, Dana. Shannon Roy is assisting us with the conference, so thank you, Shannon, and we'd like to thank her for her work and for keeping us on track during our panels. So let's get started. So excited. First and foremost, thank you for being here. We appreciate you being with us in whatever time zone you are experiencing right now. During this panel, please feel free to use the chat to share thoughts, comments, and relevant links. There will be a question and answer session after the artist presentations, so you can raise your digital hand to ask a question, or you can post your comment or question in the chat if you prefer that I read them there. We ask that you please keep your mic on mute during the presentations. So we'll get started. Today's panel features past artist in residence, Déborah Maia de Lima, Lou Sheppard, and Camilla Mackerel. I'll briefly introduce each of them before their 15 to 20-minute presentations, and we'll paste a longer bio for your reference about them in the chat. After the last presentation, we'll open it up for questions and discussions. So for our first presenter, Déborah Maia de Lima is the 8th Lantz Artist in Residence. She was recipient in 2018-2019. Déborah is a postdoctoral fellow in the Department of Integrated Studies in Education at McGill University. She has a PhD in Études et Pratiques des Arts, Université de Québec à Montréal, Canada, and in Performing Arts, Brazil. Her postdoctoral research focuses on providing ways to implement body work as an art-based tool with Indigenous girls and young women as part of a social change framework, and to develop body and movement interventions for preventing SGBV with Indigenous girls and young women. Welcome, Déborah.
I'm going to open this. Thank you, Elizabeth. So nice to see you again after so long. Yes. I want to thank you, Dana. I want to thank everybody that's here. I'm really excited to see all the artists in residence, because some of them I've heard of, I didn't see, and then here we have a chance to see all of them and know all the work. So I'm really, really happy to be here. And that was a brave effort to make this thing happen. So I thank you very much. I'm gonna try, because basic things on my life is based on tryouts, really. So I'm going to try to make this presentation in two parts. The first one would be kind of showing. I didn't want to show what I did, but how I did in the P-Lantz, and the differences. Some of the things that I'm going to talk. Luckily, we started to talk on the last panel, so I think it's going to be easier. It's going to be nice to have it right now. And then, if we have time, I'm going to ask you to experience a little bit of the work. And that's a challenge, because arts in the education, it's about challenge. It's about breaking rules. So, I mean, don't get mad at me. We are, all of us now are pixels, so no one will be able to kill anybody. I know that maybe you may want to, so it's okay. We can do it after. But let's, I'm going to ask Shannon or Dana if we can start to share the screen. I'm having an iPad, so I cannot share the screen with the iPad. So, good. Wow, so this is just the first introduction. Next, please. And we're gonna talk about dance. And this is a very, very, very important, I would say, I think I would say a challenge in universities, because the art of dance usually is like, we say that is the poor cousin of the arts. No, it's just a little one. It's below. We always say this because usually doing with arts, now working with dance. Sorry, it involves a lot of I would say the word challenge again, and then in the education we have to do a lot of things to make it happen, but it's really worth it. So can we go next, please? And first of all, I want to say thank you to, please, next. Can you go next, please? To Claudia and Maria for inviting me at the beginning with the visiting artists in residence, which I had a chance to be with Aaron and Victoria. That Aaron talked a little bit, before me. And next, please. And also the people, next one, please. Yes, the people that were with us, Sadaf, Leanne, Laurie, all the staff that make it happen. I would also would like to thank the McGill staff, people that worked with the folders, with the internet, Facebook, and all that stuff, because we don't do anything without. We are a community and we are a group. When we talk about artists in residence, and I'm going to put my talk related to this, we're talking about really being in community. Next, please. And a big thank to Madame Pauline Smith, that she was just amazing. I mean, I had a chance to talk a lot with her, to dance with her, and I really want to remercier Madame Pauline for giving to the artists the opportunity to be at McGill and to work with the students at McGill. Next, please. Okay, so let's talk about dance and what based my work. Dance can be known as language and knowledge. In the academy, I was using dance as knowledge, where we prioritize and work at McGill. Can we go first? Next, please. I know that may be a little bit boring, but it's not too long. So when we understand dance as a language, we associate the purpose of this art with the expression and the externalization of one's intimacy as a framework of one's soul. On the other hand, when dance is seen as a form of knowledge, it is seen as a way of understanding and knowing the world. as a way of thinking and existing in the world. So that was the main goal of my practice, to make art as knowledge. Can you go, please? Next. And then we can go as art as a process and art as a product. In the case of the artists in residence, we had, sorry, can you go, please? It's kind of hard not having the control, but let's go. Art as a process is to create something based on the students' own ideas. On the other hand, next, please. Art as product is to create something that the teacher brings to class or a process output. So when we think about art, we have to think that art is primarily a concept, and it's not so easy to identify what is art and what is not. So the discussion that we had in the last panel, arts and artists, they are the core of my practice as an artist and as an artist in residence, because I come from the what in Brazil we say theater mambembe, on the streets. I come from the streets. I come practicing with the community, and related to the art as a process is the idea of art as a process is exactly what I brought to McGill Lantz Artists in Residence. So if we say that art is such a diversified phenomenon, it's not possible to find a common sense to all its manifestations, nor a condition that allows us to define it. So we can define it, we can study about art, but I like very much the idea of one Portuguese artist. I didn't get her name. I looked for, didn't get her name, but she says that art is everything that makes your knee break. So everything that you can, make your knee shake. So everything that shakes you, we can call it art. So when we think of arts, we also think of the notion of creativity. And immediately it comes to mind, which is still seen as a privileged field, as we talked in the last panel, where individuals have a wide emotional and intellectual freedom not found in other areas. The work in the P-Lands that I brought had the idea of break all that stuff. Can you, next please, can you go next? And then we're gonna talk about the art as a process. So when you think of this, artist in education, artist educator, or artist is in education, in inclusive movement education, because when we talk about university, we're talking about every kind of people. We're talking about diversity. And the idea, the core principles that based my work were, first, the respect for the student's internal time. Although I had ideas, although I brought ideas, I made them move. Each one has had his or her own time. So each one showed and learned in different time frame. So this is very important. The presence, being there, being at the moment, and also having a connection with the students. What does it mean? Is seeing them. And this is something that we are missing. We're missing and we are losing a lot with technology in a certain way. Even in the panels, like see the other one, really see the face, see the body. We are basic now, we are mostly on the screens. So it's something that I was very lucky to be there in the presence with them. Can you go next, please? And then we have as an artist educator, we go to be a bridge We are a bridge, but the bridge is not between the student, I would say, and the student. It's not between both. The bridge that I'm talking about is between the student and himself or herself or themselves. You know, it's the person and the person. So the bridge that we need to be aware of is how to make them make connection with themselves. And then the art just pops up. It's just a little, it's like a bit what Jamie was saying, you know, like what's to be an artist. And this is something that we worked a lot in the residence, how to be yourself in a totally diversified world, feeling yourself and feeling that you can make something happen. Also, equal relationship. What does it mean? We are equal. We learn and we teach. And then I can go a little bit to Paulo Freire. You know, it's from Brazil too, but you know him a lot. And we are not in the world to adapt to it, but to change it. So we need to change the world. We need to change the environment we're doing. And for this, the timing is really important. Being is really important. And having this space. So the artist in education, the artist in the P-lands, I would say that was my main principle over there. What moved me is to make a space, is to open space. So the students could be who he or she or them is or are. So we work with the body as an object. There's body as an object and body subject. We work with both in the sense that when you see a body as an object, we see a body as a machine or a tool under the voluntary commands of the person. But when we see a body as subject, the body is seen as the body holds the body. Let's see how I will express this. The body is the center of a personal look in the world. And all the activities we did based it on that. So the main goal was developing a sensitive perception of the world potentially helps. We know that it potentially helps us to act with more empathy, with more compassion, with more respect for differences and inequalities. Artistic approaches that deal with the body have the capacity to broaden the sensitivity of this youth that were in the P-lands. And now we are using the archive, as Aaron mentioned, that is just a gift for all of us. This youth, they are the artisans of today's and tomorrow's world. They are building the world already. So the only thing that we need is to give them space for this. Art comes in this way as a sense of fulfiller, saving us for the alienation of ourselves. And that's the main, for me, the main move of my work in the archive, in the archive space, but in the P-lands. Artists in residence. Can we go next, please? We're almost finishing. And then we finished as a performance. We did a product. But in this product, I would say, this is something that we created. We had fun, and then we finished that with a presentation, a performance, improvisation with performance with some frames. And then asking the people that were seen to dance with us. So this is that was the process or the main goal of my stay at McGill as an artist in residence. And that was really nice because these kids that are there, we began in September and then finished, I think, in March. My residence was going to finish in March, but they wanted to continue it. So we continued. I mean, using the archive space until July, because I always say that when we see people that want to learn, you cannot say no. So just go and teach and be with them. And that was basically what happened. Can you go to the next? I think we are finishing. We're almost finished. I just wanted to leave the idea, a quote of Martha Graham that says, great dancers are not great because of their technique. They are great because of their passion. And merci beaucoup, and thank you very much. I know that it was fast, but now, okay, I have some time, I think. I would like to open, you know, being a foreigner sometimes is difficult because we think in our language, and to translate it sometimes takes more time. I would like you to open your cameras, please. And we go really fast to another situation. I'm just going a little bit fast because of the, hey Aaron, hey Marcela. Hi Everybody. And I'm gonna challenge you. I don't know, we have not a lot of time, but we're not gonna use the music. I just wanna challenge you to one thing. The presence is important. When you're talking about performing arts, when you're talking about dance, about theater, when you're talking about being, it's very, very important to be there. That's why I asked you to open the cameras. And I just wanted now, with the cameras open, just close your eyes a little bit. And try, when I say try, it's because maybe it's a little bit new, this, to acknowledge what you're feeling now. One thing that might help is to see how the breathing comes. If it comes slowly, fast, acknowledge this a little bit, just for some seconds. See how's your heartbeat. See if your mind, if your head, if the thoughts are speeding, if they calm down a little bit. Don't think of thinking. Only let it go, or let it come. And now I would like you to put a hand in a part of your body. You can choose whatever you want. Just put your hand in a part of your body. Let your hand there. And hear, not with your ears, but hear a word that comes. It may be a feeling, it may be a word, it may be a thought. Just hear it. When you do it, go to another part. To another part. And when you are aware of this last part, you can open your eyes. Not because I said. Okay. Unfortunately, we don't have too much time. We can talk about this afterwards if you want. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Deborah. We look forward to the discussion. Thank you so much. Next, we'll be hearing from Lou Sheppard, the 9th P. Lantz Artist in Residence, also 2018 to 2019. Lou works in interdisciplinary audio, performance, and installation-based practice. His work pays queer attention to systems of meaning-making and how these systems construct and order our bodies and environments. His research is often evidenced through graphic notations, scripts, and scores, which are then performed in collaboration with other artists and in community gatherings. Welcome, Lou.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's really fun to get to see everybody and see familiar faces. And Debbie, thanks so much, because I was having a little bit of pre-presentation nerves, so that took care of it. Appreciate it very much. I'm just going to jump right in to sharing my screen and jump right into showing you some stuff. Okay. I was just having a little bit of troubles with my audio, so if it doesn't show up, let me know, and it's not totally necessary that you hear it, but okay, so full screen here. I wanted to talk today a little bit about kind of some of the projects that I started in the P. Lantz program at McGill and where they've gone with where I've kind of taken them in my practice. And so I think it'll be kind of a nice way to talk a little bit about the ideas that I was working on and like sort of give you some ideas of what I'm thinking about now. This is where I live now. I just like to show it because I'm like pretty excited about that. During the pandemic, my partner and I decided to move to Nova Scotia, along with many, many people in the world, which is where I grew up. And this is the property that we now live on. And so I like to talk about this in relation to like growing up in Nova Scotia as a settler and knowing that my Scottish heritage was sort of meant to be here on New Scotland's land, and sort of feeling this sense of belonging as I was growing up to this place, and like the sense of love and connection to this land. And as people began to talk to me about the reality that this is, of course, stolen land, it's unceded territory, and that it has another name, or at least one other name, many other names, but it carries the name of Mi'kma'ki as well. And that question around when I was thinking about the idea that this territory is called Mi'kma'ki and using that name for this place shifts my relationship, of course, to one of like direct lineage of like this sort of like Scottish ancestry, like on New Scotland, to one of like questioning my place and unsettling my place here. So, and recognizing my place as a settler, as an uninvited guest, as a complicated presence here. And so that question and the ways that language shifts our understanding of ourselves and our identities, as well as shifting our understanding of place, the names for things shifting our understanding of place, is really fundamental to all of the work that I do, and all the ways that I kind of think about how the world, or like how our sort of experiences of the world work. So we'll come, like you'll sort of see that theme in my work over and over, but just as one example of this thinking, when I was actually at P. Lantz, I was able to go to the Banff Center for a quick residency, and I was there working with a group of dancers or interdisciplinary dancers. And we were thinking a lot about being on Treaty 7 territory in Banff, because, you know, when you're doing something at Banff or kind of, when you're listening to any kind of land acknowledgement, we're always sort of referencing treaties and talking about this sort of history of treaty relationships. And so I really wanted to know what Treaty 7 was, as we're kind of like acknowledging it. So I did a performance looking at the actual text of Treaty 7 and reading it. And so this is a performance of some readers and some people moving around and listening to people reading Treaty 7 just out loud. And as you can probably well imagine, if you've read any treaties, it's like a pretty dense document. It's filled with all sorts of dense language, and like it's kind of a bit hard to parse out. And we were reading it, and I wanted to kind of give this experience of like confusion or sort of like overwhelm of the language of the treaty, because I had found in some research that basically that the treaty itself, when it was signed, was unable to be translated into the indigenous languages of the people who were signing it, because it actually, there were two really different ontological systems between English that the treaty was written in, and between the indigenous languages of the people who were asked to sign and agree to it. And so I found this evidence that was talking about talking to elders in Treaty 7 territory about what Treaty 7 means. And what was remembered from that treaty, or sort of like what was known of how the treaty meant in these communities, was that it was a treaty of peace, and that it did not mention any land surrender, and that it was really about sharing the land with newcomers in exchange for privileges. So thinking about that, and thinking about the ways that, these two different systems of language that just like don't even translate into each other, where one system can talk about owning land and rights to land and like and occupation of land, and one can talk about sharing and peace. It's like, and that these two things are meant to be like the same, like they're meant to hold the same meaning. I find really fascinating. And it's something that I keep thinking about in relation to being here in Nova Scotia, and like what it means to kind of live by treaties, but then also to kind of really question what those are. So anyways, language, big into it, really interested in it. When I was at McGill, I was really interested in this idea that there were so many people coming into the the art hive, and like kind of like coming into the community that we were working with, who were speaking so many different languages. And I wanted to think about all the ways that our languages and ourselves and our identities can and cannot translate into an academic environment. And so, thinking about what we can bring with us, and then what we also kind of can't bring with us when we come into a university space. So this is a project, it was called What We Can't Say in English. And it was a project where I asked people who spoke languages other than English to bring words that they couldn't translate into English to me. And we had a conversation about like what those languages or what those words meant, and kind of tried to kind of have that experience of linguistic glitch, where like we couldn't actually, where when you realize that there's a word that means something different than we can translate into the languages that we speak, it opens up a whole world of meaning beyond our own understanding of the world. So this is one of my favorites. It was Soraya who brought it to me, and the word is sirmach, and it means to scoop out the last bit of a delicious meal from the serving dish with your finger, which I love, not only because it is something that, we all do, or maybe I do, but also because it talks a lot about what it means to sit, like the importance in the language that this word is from, to like sit around a table and like be comfortable and relax with each other. And so thinking about when we come to universities or we come into an academic setting, and what we can bring, or like what we're sort of asked to not bring with us when we say that everyone's going to work in English. This is part of can't be brought into the institution, or that we can look for ways of like how we can bring that into the institution. So on that thread, I have always been really interested in these ideas of these words that don't translate. Debbie, I'm hoping that you'll correct my pronunciation of this saudade, which is a Portuguese word for a feeling of nostalgic longing for someone or something that has been lost. And so it's sort of like I think of it as a kind of nostalgia, but then also like a kind of like grief. But what I love about saudade as a word is that it's possible to experience saudade as an anticipatory emotion. So it's like something that you can actually feel and think about before you've actually lost the thing that you're mourning. And so I came across that word just out of my own like research and nerdiness, and it applies so nicely to a lot of the work that I've been doing around bird song and around the loss of bird song in our environment. So when I was at the, well, I'll just skip forward maybe a minute to show you. Oh, perhaps I don't have it. Apologies. Yeah. Oh, yeah, there it is. So when I was at the residency, I was thinking about birdsong and what was missing in Montreal's environment, urban environment, what sounds we weren't able to hear while we were sort of moving around, and especially in relation to spring, what sounds we weren't hearing as the birds were coming back to life. So I took 10 bird species that were threatened in Montreal's downtown area. So 10 species that have been displaced by urbanization, or that had been, whose habitats had been threatened, and that now had been placed on like lists of concern or like watching for endangered species. And I turned these 10 bird species, I took their spectrograms, which is like a word or like a sort of sound image of their calls. And a spectrogram is basically, I'll just go back. This is a spectrogram of a robin. So it's basically like an image that notates the sound of a bird, or really of anything. But, you know, especially in my case, birds. And so you can see that it kind of, when you look at it, you can start to see a pattern that indicates rhythm, and that might indicate frequency, or might even indicate like duration. And so I was looking at these spectrograms and thinking that they could be played something like a musical score. So I gave them, I brought these 10 spectrograms from these different missing birds in Montreal to musicians at the, like within McGill, within the music department. And we actually created a performance that was playing these spectrograms as though they were music. And I was imagining this idea of these musicians playing these sounds, and like trying to kind of like imagining what it would be like if we no longer had bird sound in our environment, and what it would feel like to try to kind of recreate that sound through these sound images, or these sort of like data visualizations of their sound. So that work I called Silent Spring in Montreal. And since then, I continued to work with that, with the Toronto Biennial and at the Toronto Sculpture Garden, to create an immersive installation of birds, of like sort of musicians playing these spectrograms as music. And so it's this installation where you were able to go in and walk around the Sculpture Garden and hear these different sounds, and imagine this sort of loss of birdsong in our environment, and then also kind of imagine a future where we're trying to remember what that sounds like. So the piece, I can just try to play a little bit of audio for you. The piece starts out with more of an analog translation of the spectrograms, and then moves into a much more digital synthesized version over the course of the installation. But the installation was up for about, I don't know, it was up for like maybe a year. And it played on a 18-hour loop and then was silent for the night. So, and this installation was called Dawn Chorus Evensong. Is everybody hearing that sound? So just a little bit of a quick taste of it. And if you're interested in hearing more, I can send a link. Last project that I want to talk about, because the time is so short, continuing to think, well, I guess, you know, I left the residency, and then quite soon after, our world changed really dramatically. I was out in BC doing another residency that was about community engagement. And suddenly the community that I was working with, we all had to stay isolated from each other. So it was quite an interesting challenge to be working in community at that time in 2020. But I developed a project there called Murmurations, which was again based on my sort of observations and thinking about birds. But I'd been really thinking about bird flocking, because out in Richmond, BC, there's this incredible flock of snow geese. They're these like incredible white birds that are like sort of like, they're like so loud and like uncomfortable the way they sound. They're just like, they make this terrible racket, but they're these sort of like glowing puffballs that like just like fill the sky. And they flock over Richmond on their way up to Siberia and then back down the coast during their annual migrations. And I was really thinking about the way that they flew together and the ways that they knew how to navigate space with others, because they would fly in these like incredibly huge flocks, but of course they would be able to kind of navigate and stay in formation as they were flying. And so I was really interested in this idea of like bird formation and flocking behavior. And I was at the same time thinking about this idea of social distancing and how we were all suddenly having to keep 2 meters square apart from each other at all times. And, you know, if you remember like early in the pandemic, when you would go into a grocery store and you'd literally be like, well, I was like with a meter stick being like, I don't know, close enough, no, too close, you know, like really thinking about this idea of like our own sort of relationship to other people, and thinking about, of course, the ways that necessitated a lot of cohesion from everybody around me, but then also this kind of feeling of apartness. And so I created this piece called Murmurations, which is, of course, Murmurations is like what we call like a group of swallows that are like flying in that kind of like pulsing formation. And so this piece is a dance score for 7 dancers. And if you follow it in unison, then you'll never come within 2 meters of each other. So you actually don't like run into each other. You don't come close to each other. So I painted this. There we go. I painted it on a concrete parking lot in Richmond, and then left it there just for people to kind of experience and follow, like a kind of wacky hopscotch. And it was a really interesting way of thinking about bringing people together, and like sort of the ways that we needed to kind of that people really needed to experience something together in that time, but then also feelings of being separate and keeping yourself apart. So this is a group of people, including me, dancing through it, or kind of hopscotching our ways through it. And it was a really interesting project to kind of like think my way through this like time of the pandemic. I think I will just mention one. I've got 2 minutes and 40 seconds. I'll just mention one last project, and because it is leading to some newer work for me. This is another project that came out of the thinking from working at McGill and thinking about this idea of how people can participate with their bodies in my work, or sort of can like perform by experiencing the work. And so this is a project called Rites of Passage. I also made it in Richmond. And it's following the pathways of rivers that have been buried underneath the city. You know, as the environment is developed, rivers are often like dammed or like rerouted or filled in or buried. And so I wanted to create a series of walking trails that followed the pathways of these old rivers, with the idea that as people move through them, their bodies moving through those spaces actually began to echo the movement of water along those forgotten routes. And rivers are super fascinating because they are, they carry with them a set of like rights, riparian rights. So a river has a right to move over the land that it moves over, as well as humans have rights to move along the riverbank, like this is in Canadian law. So that kind of like question around non-human legal rights and the ways that those kind of like echo has been the focus of some new work that I'm doing for a project at York University this year. I will leave it there. There's lots of other stuff going on that's coming out of that, coming out of the time at McGill, but it was like definitely a really fruitful time to be thinking, or that I'm still kind of unraveling. So I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit of it with you.
Thank you so much, Lou. It's wonderful to see sort of the continuation of the work too. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll look forward to the discussion. So next we'll be hearing from Camilla Mackerel, the third P. Lantz Artist in Residence, 2016 to 2017. Named after the god of love, Camilla Mackerel is a multilingual writer, visual artist, performer, translator, and educator who believes in love, transformation, and justice. Their work ventures beyond the borders of disciplinarity and creates hybrid spaces from which to enunciate decolonial and queer vocabularies. Wholeheartedly invested in ocean narratives, island sovereignty, transgender poetics, and ancestral healing, their body of work challenges colonial notions of time and space as these relate to history, power, language, subject formation, and the body. Welcome, Kama.
So make friends with your bones. Soak them overnight in coconut oil. Wrap them in banana leaves and polish them under the moonlight. Rub salt inside of your pores and crust the cracks in your skin, your scars and imperfections, dried fruit crystallized on a copper platter yielded to Surya for preservation. Offer your earthy armor to the open skies. Let the burn of salt purify your pain, the rawness of tears purge your wounds, the churn of waves cleanse your island body. Dig mountains with the edges of your hip bones. Sculpt temples from the softness of your lips. Make homes for the sacredness of your stories. Your body is whole. Your body is an island. Your body is home. Your body is the ocean. Greetings, everyone. I really wanted to start with a little bit of poetry today, and specifically, I wanted to start with this poem. I mean, this part of a poem. This is a poem from my debut poetry collection, Zomfam, which came out in 2020. And actually, I'm just going to go right ahead and share my screen so that all of this starts making sense. So I wanted to start with this. Hold on, how do I play? Sorry. is this good? Everybody's seeing my screen, right? Okay, I'm just going to go with that. I start with this because this is the piece called "Your Body is the Ocean" in Zomfam in the book, and actually the year-end exhibit that I did during my time in the Lantz initiative. My end of year exhibit was actually called "My Body is the Ocean." So there's a lot that happened during this residency, and what I'm going to do really today is more than I'm starting with the end. There's quite a few projects that I developed during the duration of the residency, but I'm specifically going to start with the idea of the ocean and the body and salt. And where this project moved from there, because I feel like I was working through quite a few ideas and I was still in the preliminary research, and then it feels like a lifetime ago now because it was in 2017, so that was 5 years ago, and then after that this project took roots and became so many other things. So out of the multiple things that I was researching and working on during my residency, one of them was actually I was developing a manuscript, a poetry manuscript for a performance. So one of the things that I had brought into my residency was also my practice in spoken word and the multiple ways in which the voice and spoken word could occupy multiple spaces within the Faculty of Education and more broadly McGill University. So at the end of my residency, so I had like this multidisciplinary exhibit, but also part of what we did, there was like a vernissage where there was a performance, and this picture that you see right now is a performance ritual, the actual performance ritual called "Your Body is the Ocean," that I had performed with like salt. I was starting to explore with salt as a material, just in the materiality of salt as what connects me to the ocean. I'm from Mauritius, and my ancestors had crossed the oceans as indentured labor and as slaves to work on sugarcane plantation. So being here in Canada, in Montreal, salt is where I went. I started playing with salt in terms of figuring out the materiality of how to represent the ocean, but also salt as what represents the salt of the ancestors and the salt of the land. So I had started with this project, and I had started developing this manuscript at the time, which I had presented at the end of my residency, just as a spoken word performance. It was just like a spoken word piece. And then when I left the residency in 2017, I started thinking about this project in other ways. So what I had done at the time, I would typically be doing spoken word, where spoken word is just me with a microphone, and it's just my voice, and it's the voice that guides the entire story and the poetry and creates the universe. And as I was approaching the end of my residency, one of the things that came concrete to me that felt like almost like an urgency is that I wanted to move beyond spoken word just as something where the body is static and it's the voice that moves around. And I really wanted to know, what does it look like and what does it feel like if the poetry can move through the body of the performer and move across space? What does poetry look like if it moves across space? So then this manuscript that I started writing during my residency became a manuscript for a performance. So this is Zomfam, the performance, which actually never got to be presented to an audience because it was supposed to premiere at the MAI, the Montréal Arts Interculturels, in April 2020. That was the date. It was supposed to premiere in April 2020, and we all know what happened after that. And then it was moved into October 2020, and then we got into the red, the red zone or whatever it was, the second wave in the fall. So it got cancelled twice. So I call it my ghost performance because I never got to perform this piece. But this was actually the full piece. It's 90 minutes of dance and movement and rituals and spoken word, where really the poetry takes life through the body and the poetry moves across space. Side note, I will put a link in the chat after that. I finally, after 2 years, since this performance was supposed to be presented, I'm presenting one performance on May 7th at Festival Vue sur la Relève. It's going to be at La Maison de la Culture Claude Léveillé by Métro Jean Talon. So I can put the link to that if you want tickets. That's on May 7th. Otherwise, I have dates for end of October, beginning of November in Toronto, 5 shows at Buddies and Bad Times Theatre coming up. So finally, after 2 years, the show is going to find its audience. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some images from the performance, what it looks like, and then I'm going to show you a short video of it, and then I'm going to tell you more because there's more happening around this. So those are some images from what became the poetry embodied in the performance as a movement dance piece. So those are some images from this. And so related to that, then I also developed, I first wrote the manuscript for the stage, and then I was offered a publishing contract from Metonymy Press, which is a local queer publishing house here based in Montreal, to turn this manuscript into a book. And what's interesting about it for me was that as I was doing this, I was very interested, just as much on the one hand, I was thinking of when I built the performance, I was really thinking of the question of what does poetry look like if poetry moves through space and moves through the body. And after that, when I turned the manuscript into a book, I started thinking of the question of what if the poetry, what if the body of the text could actually perform on the page in the same way that the body of the performer performs in the space. So when I developed the book, what became the book, what became the literary object, that then became I really thought of very intentionally, what does the body of the text look like? And how do I bring basically my visual arts practice and my performance practice into a literary work? And how do I let the body of the text actually perform on the page? I'll get to the question of interdisciplinarity in a bit. Now I'm just going to show you a small trailer from the performance so you get a sense of that.
There is a voice that does not speak English, does not speak French, and yet echoes wisdom and truth in my bloodstream like the waves of the ocean that witness the loss of our languages. And that voice tells me that I do not need an imperial language to define myself, that I do not need to be trans in English or in French, that colonialism has already wrapped itself like a knot around our vocal cords. And even though our lineage is one of silence that we weave in between our intimacies, this voice exists deep within, and it speaks like my mother, like my grandmother, like my great-grandmother, like the generations of women and femmes who fought to keep our language alive and pass it on from generation to generation.
So, so that was like a quick trailer to Zompam. If in case, also I can put the link. I mean, the book is also available in any bookstores, but I can also put the link after I'm done the presentation, if in case you want to get a copy of the book, or if you want to get tickets to the show on May 7th. So one of the things that I was already exploring during my time in residency 5 years ago was hybrid spaces and interdisciplinarity, really, because and I've worked in, I did like installations within and performances within different spaces in in the Faculty of Education, like I had done like some community arts project and some textile installations. And at the end, it was thinking through how do I bring all of this together, including the performance and the spoken word. So that notion of hybridity for me, of the hybrid spaces, and the multiple ways in which we can bring different disciplines that are not supposed to belong together, how we can bring them together, and at the intersection of those, how the intersection of those, for me at least as an artist, is a very ripe and rich space through which a decolonial and queer enunciation can emerge. And I really think that like the decolonial poetics comes from interspaces because because I think the colonial context within which we live requires us to live within very specific narratives and very specific categories and very specific disciplines. And I think to be able to counter that, it's interspaces that allows us then to allow a decolonial enunciation. And in many ways, sorry, I'm just, looking at, I have time also here. In many ways, those were things that I think I was just testing really at the beginning of when I was doing my residency. I really used the time to test things, and I felt like it's after the residency that things like matured and kept maturing into projects. So one of the major things, Zumfam speaks of the legacy of slavery and the indenture, and how does a transgender child find themselves within that legacy and find spaces to articulate what I call in the book languages of love. And with that, so I have kept working with the researching the island and the ocean since I did My Body is the Ocean 5 years ago at Lantz. So that's one of the projects. So I'm going to walk you through like a couple of other projects to show you the multiple lives that it's taken since then. This is specifically a project called Breaking the Promise of Tropical Emptiness. And what I do, this is a visual arts project that I've developed. Actually, part of this project was developed because during the month of December of my residency between 2016 and 2017, I had gone back to Mauritius to be able to work on part of this project. So this was already a project that was that I was thinking about even when I was doing my residency at the time. And with this project, it's a visual arts project where I critique basically the postcard as a colonial artifact and the ways in which the postcard are supposed to be framing colonial islands as colonial spaces, because postcards and travel literature are typically always portray islands as empty spaces. Those are empty spaces where you can go, that you can colonize all over again. And the promise that we gave is that it's going to be an empty space, and there's never a black or brown body in any postcards. And what I did with this project is that I went back home to Mauritius and I traveled across the island to recreate, find the cliches of postcards, and then rework through that representation, basically bring the transgender body to the forefront to speak back to that colonial notion of the postcard. And from there, from this project, so we stay in the notion of islands and ocean. I started developing another project called Queering the Island Body. This is a pandemic project, again, that got really complicated in its development, but I presented an iteration of it at Momenta, la Biennale de l'Image, last year at Algarve du Cam. And what I did with this, so with this project, I'm really, on the one hand, I'm really exploring what is the spiritual relationship that exists on the one hand between the what I call the body of the island in my work, and what is the relationship, the spiritual space. Again, we get into the hybrid space. What is the spiritual space between the body of the island and the transgender body? Which was one question. And the other question that I explore is the space of the sovereignty of the islands, right? Because even within what we broadly call post-colonial studies, there's still that notion that islands are empty spaces and that islands have no sovereignty. And I think we see that right now based on the ecological concerns that we have about islands and the multiple things we still see on like Survivor and all the reality television shows that like now, you know, about islands where you can just go and the island is empty, and it's a test of how do we as civilized human beings interact with the wilderness. So those are the questions that I'm interrogating with this. And with this project that I also showed at La Galerie Bucam for Momenta last year, really I work with what I call archipelagos of islands, where there's the archipelago of the poetry that interacts, because we tend to think that islands end in their borders around the ocean where the beach is, but actually islands continue under the ocean. Like there are mountains under the ocean. Islands have bodies that extend, so they're not clear boundaries like the arbitrary boundaries that we create for, you know, like this is the line between Canada and the US. So I really interrogate those boundaries and what I call an archipelago of islands. I'm going to go quick for the rest because I have about 3 minutes left now. But quickly, so what I did with this installation was that there was the textile installation and the paintings and the poetry, the archipelagos that redefine it. But there was also this video piece, and so this video piece is called "My Body Is the Ocean." So we go back to "My Body Is the Ocean." It's a ritual video piece that I created. I'm going to talk about it very quickly in a moment. But the video work was actually projected on a bed of salt. So what you see there is actually salt, and the projection happens on salt. So I'll show you how it looks like. Yeah, so that's just like a quick piece around this. So one of the projects that I'm developing right now as well is I'm developing a series, a video series. So part of the question of the poetry. So the first question was, what does the poetry look like if poetry can move across the body, across space? Which became Zomfam the performance. And then there was the question of what does the body of the text look like if the body of the text performs on the page, which became Zomfam the book. And then there's a third element now that I started developing. And I only started developing this element because of the pandemic. The thing about it is in 2020, when all the theaters shut down and then live performance was not happening anymore, I was like, what do I do? I've been working on this show, on this performance for the past 5 years. What do I do with it? And then I started working on moving image. I had never done video work at all before. And it's really because of the pandemic that I started doing video work. That's because as a performance artist, I could not make an audience. So now I've started developing this project. It's still very much in development, where I am trying to understand, can we as subjects, as human beings, can we step into poetry? Is poetry something that we can walk into? So I'm kind of starting to dream like a sort of multimedia installation / a video installation. And I'm going to show you a quick excerpt from this. Is this the right video? Yeah. Our mothers, our grandmothers, and our femme ancestries. I invoke the teachers, healers, mentors, caregivers, and warrior women of history. Ages, lineages, generations of witchers and fighters who infuse the universe with love, rage, and magic.
I invoke.
That's about it. Thank you so much for your attention, but also so much gratitude again for this residency. Like, there's just so much that I started there and that I've just been carrying on into my career and that I keep developing. I mean, the salt, the ocean, the body, like all of it is just expanding. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kama. Thank you so much. Thank you, Deborah, Lou, Kama, for your presentations. Oh my goodness, so much to see and hear and think and ask. We have about 30 minutes, approximately 30 minutes. Normally we would go till about 11:30, but we might be able to push it to 45 for questions and discussions. So I will say to all of you, to everyone, if you have a question, please raise your digital hand so that we can call on you. And if you have a question and you'd prefer to put it in the chat, we can do that too. I'm going to try to manage. I'm not sure what the floods will be. So if I don't call on you and you have a burning question or you'd like to make some observations or connect things, please be visible and loud, and I will do my best. So let's open it up to, I guess we can just have it open to questions for any of the three artists, and we'll see where that takes us. Lou, we need a name for that moment in Zoom where you ask and there's a silence and everyone is waiting to see. We need a name for that, a new name.
I'll work on it. I'll see what I can find.
I have a question that came to me that maybe I'll start off because it's general into all three, and it's specifically linked to the pandemic. Because I feel that so much of what all of you are working on is connections in some way, spaces with community and connection. And I was thinking that I'd like to ask you, in looking back, would you say the pandemic for you has been kind of friend or foe? In other words, has it pushed you in ways that maybe you may not have moved toward, or did it really accentuate or compress your work? What would you say if you look back now? Most of you, it's 4 or 5 years of work since the Lantz. I'm just interested in your kind of backward gaze over the last couple of years.
I'm happy to start there, if that's all right.
Great, sure.
Yeah, because it is something I've been thinking a lot about. And when Kama was just mentioning like this shift to video work, and it's so true, like I think the pandemic I've seen so many artists shifting how they work. Like actually so many of my peers are now working in VR, which is really interesting. Like just like the ways that we're sort of bringing people together through these different platforms is really fascinating to me. One, actually for me, it kind of did, like, it sort of pushed me towards like an opposite, or maybe like a different kind of, I guess, like way of thinking, where I started to really try to figure out how to bring bodies, people's bodies into performance when I wasn't present, or like kind of people performing or like engaging with the work through their body, through their presence, like without me having to be there or to kind of like direct something to happen. So I've started to like work with a lot of purpose-built sculptural material that people kind of interact with and might climb on or like sit on, and this idea of scores that people kind of encounter and then perform like through their sort of interactions with them. So I didn't get to mention, but I'm like working on this piece for the subway station in Vancouver, and it's like a score that asks you to think about the ask you to think about the history of the tide that has been infilled in the area that the subway station will be in, and to feel that history with your body as you're like commuting, like the kind of rhythm of the tide through the same area. So yeah, I think that's, for me, it's like kind of, it's really asked me to think about how people might encounter the work in like kind of like in physical space, and like it's really asked me to think about like what physical space means and what people's body, like how people's bodies are implicated in work, which has been kind of strange. But also just to say, like, I think it has been friend and foe. Like, I think it has been like really hard, but it's also meant that like the opportunities to participate in things have just like, you know, like there's been good and bad to it. And here we are, like in different parts of the world together today. But yeah.
Thanks, Lou. Anybody else have thoughts about? I mean, I guess to summarize, Lou, it sounds like it's a bit of each. I mean, it's neither, you know, purely the difficulty, because it's been so rich in terms of, you know, the production and the ideas and the necessity of it. But yeah, I'm not saying it's not been difficult. Debbie or Kama, do you have anything?
Yes, and then thank you for the question, because this is something that Kama might know it, because we from the performing arts. It's really tough. But I think, well, there's two things on this. It's totally different, you know. When you do things on Zoom or with someone, because as I said, we became like pixels. No, we are not humans anymore. Now, all of us, we are 3D pixels, and this makes all the difference in the sense of how I will relate to this. But by the other hand, we also get in touch with the energy. And the energy, when I say energy, it means the body energy and all kinds of energy. And so we can do a lot of good work on the screen, with the screen. And then we discover that. And I think without the pandemic, we would not be able to do it, because we are forced to. And for example, for me, from the arts, I see Kama too, from the arts, not from the dance field. Maybe Kama will say something. I just love your work, really beautiful. And I think we miss the contact with the other one, because the body has to be available. And we develop this availability with other. This is really important. With other people, of course, we can use material. We can use chairs. We can use things to dance with, but it's not the same thing. Of course, it's not. But so this thing about being available, it misses a lot. We are in the third year of it. No, that's the third year. So it strikes hard. By the other hand, we could discover, for example, storytelling. I work with storytelling, and doing storytelling on Zoom is just fantastic, because we can play with the cameras, we can play with the space, we can play with the background, and then we also have other possibilities that we don't have when we don't have the pandemic, not the pandemic, but when we are not on Zoom. So it's all about like making a lemonade from a lime, no? I mean, what do I have? How I will create with this thing that happens, with the thing that makes it impossible to be the way it was. And I guess this is the biggest thing about arts. Artists it's always trying to open space. It's always trying to go with anybody goes. It's always trying to find like small holes that we can open doors. And then we need to be aware and we need to use this, and we grow, and I think we let others grow too, without that stuff, without this new creation about it. So I would say that for the performing arts, for the dance field, we are being really hurt bad, for the theater too, but for the activities, like for example storytelling or everything that we can adapt, it's being really we are having really nice surprises with that.
Thanks, Debbie.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Debbie, for this. Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that like actually speak to me. It's so, I mean, the first thing that I will say is like, I think the pandemic was hard, like across the board. It doesn't matter who you are. But it's interesting for me because I felt like in many ways, like I ended up still in my artistic practice, I still ended up thriving over the past 2 years. Like I would say the biggest shifts that have happened in my career have happened over the past 2 years. And it's interesting because I think a lot of like this for me, you know, I had done the residency until 2016, 2017, and then I went back into my community sector job doing community arts. And then in January 2019, I quit my job to take the leap of faith and try to be a full-time artist. And I was 1 year into this, right? Like I was getting into my groove, and then the pandemic hit. And I remember that moment of interrogating, what am I doing with my life? I don't even have a job. I'm a freelancer. Why did I, you know, like just having that moment of panic. And one of my best friends, at a bit of time we were chatting, and she's the one who said it to me. She was like, come on, we're immigrants in this country. Like, how many times have we had to reinvent ourselves? And I really thought about this in that moment where I'm like, it's true. Like, here I speak only for myself in terms of my experiences, right? Like being an immigrant, being transgender, being racialized. I did not go to art school, right? Like my entire artistic practice has constantly been a reinvention. I mean, the Lantz initiative was actually the first residence. The first thing that I did where I had funding, right? Like all my previous projects before that were done on $75 budget. So for me, it was really thinking through, oh yeah, I know how to work with restriction. Like I have always created from a place of urgency, from a place where I'm restricted, from a place where I don't have resources. So then when the pandemic hit, I was like, what do I do? Like, I've reinvented myself before for survival because I didn't have a choice. And right now there's a global pandemic. So how am I going to reinvent myself again? So for me, and in many ways, I think I had the advantage. I really consider that it was an advantage that I somehow being self-taught and community taught, not being trained in a school allows me to have, you know, like my multidisciplinary practice has happened out of curiosity, right? Like I went to just like pick up skills in whichever way I could and then put it together and then build something with it. And I think I had left aside for sure at that point. I was like, okay, I'm going to leave performance aside for now, but I still had, you know, like I translated a book during that year, a novel. My book came out. Like I was like, okay, I'm going to focus on my literary practice. I'm going to focus on my visual arts practice and what is it that I can do? And then there were the parts of just reinventing, like I had never worked in video before, where I was like, okay, let's take a risk. Just like in moments of survival, we just have to take risks, right? Like, so for me, it was that. And in many ways, yeah, it did force me to rethink my practice, rethink my relationship to my practice, rethink my relationship to collaboration. I thought we all had to rethink our relationships to collaboration, for sure. But also I will say for me, the other thing that it did as well is that just like humanly, in an interesting turn of events, the pandemic made me develop a certain presence, as Debbie was talking about this earlier during her presentation, a certain presence and stillness also that allowed me to somehow really, just like it allowed me to slow down to figure out, okay, right now we're in the context of a global pandemic and I chose to be an artist, I chose to be a poet. What is my responsibility, right? Like, what is my job as a poet when there's people dying during a global pandemic? And I think for me, taking the time to also just interrogate myself on who I want to be as an artist? Like, why did I get the calling to make art in this lifetime, in this particular moment? For me, also really grounded me deeper in my artistic voice.
Thank you, all of you. Thank you so much for those thoughts. I'm looking for questions. Does anyone have ideas, thoughts, any connections that people would like to make, either across the work of the artists or anything that you'd like to notice about what we've heard today? I'm not seeing any hands just yet. Question for any of the presenters. How did your experience, excuse me, of McGill as an institution and a community shape your approach to art? So that's Aaron's question, and then we'll go to Claudia after that.
I think I will get the ball, because this is something that I was going to ask this to the artists here, because it's, for me, I will say my experience, and I would love to hear from them too. It's very, very, very different to work in education, be an artist in education, and be an artist as an artist. We became artist educator, and not only artists. So when you were I will give my vision of it and how I work it on the freelance. When we are an artist, we are in the spotlight. So everything comes to us. So we need to develop a personal work that will put us on the spotlight. When we are in an education environment, the students have the spotlight, we rephrase, go to the students. So your job is to make them believe that they are stars, because all of us, we are. It's just how to open this talent and let it shine. So this is, for me, this is the biggest difference. It doesn't matter me and myself. I mean, I don't matter in this environment. My job is to make them believe in themselves, is to make them calm down, is to make them not compare themselves with anyone else, and let the qualities, I would say the talent, just to show up, just to come, because this is something that we learn how to do. We open the brain, we open the heart, and just let it go, and it starts to shine. So for me, this is the biggest difference, is to know when I have to step back and when I need to lead the gang, because we lead and then we just disappear and let them do whatever they can, whatever they want. And this is how we develop the learning, the creativity process, in the sense of being artists, and then not only as a job, because art for me, or being an artist, is not something that we do for a job. We are life. We need to relate to life as it's not that we need to. I think we do it. You know? The look is different, and that was my impression of it. And thanks, Aaron, for questioning this. I think you got the point.
Would anyone else like to tackle that question, or should we move on to Claudia? Just the experience of McGill as an institution, community.
I think I'm going to say a few things, maybe. And I'm going to be perfectly honest about this. I think one of the things, so I came from a very grassroots context. And in many ways, like, doing this residency for me was my introduction to McGill, but also more broadly speaking, my introduction to academic institutions and also to artistic institutions. And I think, yeah, and it wasn't always easy. Like really, my time at McGill wasn't easy. Like, I mean, it's all on the website. You can go see. I did like a 3-hour durational piece about microaggressions where I was trapped in wires because I was just experiencing so many microaggressions on the day-to-day. And there was just like a lot of dynamics happening like this, which I didn't realize that I was stepping into at the time. So my time was not always easy at McGill. And I think for me, more than anything, what it taught me, like it taught me something about the institution. And I think more than anything, it taught me, and that's something that I'm constantly learning, is how do I then, you know, like if I want to move my practice from a very grassroots setting that I had been in. And, you know, like, I mean, I did a performance at the Museum of Fine Arts last year in Montreal, right? The Montreal Museum of Fine Arts. And I can't get more institutional than that. And I think when I think back over all those experiences that started at McGill, for me, it's about, because I'll be honest here, for me, there is a distrust of the institution. I don't walk into the institution fully trusting ever. From like, if we're going to have trust, we need to build trust. We need to earn each other's trust. This is a relationship that we build. And I think for me, my experience at McGill, because I didn't have the skills that I have now, like now, when I walk into an institution, like I know how to advocate for myself. I know how to ask for what I need. And also I feel empowered enough to say, this is not working, I'm leaving, but thank you, you know, like very respectfully, because sometimes it just doesn't work. And I think in particular, being marginalized, right? Like you never know why you're being invited in the institution. Like you don't know whether it's because like, oh, we need to take this for our funders, or we need, you know, like, or is it just tokenizing, or are we actually going to make the space safe for you? And I think for me, McGill was a really deep learning process. Like it wasn't an easy process, but it was a deep learning process that I feel now allows me to situate myself better, allows me to advocate for myself better, and also allows me to know my worth and what I can bring to the table.
Thanks so much, Kama. Lou, did you want to reflect on that at all?
I think there's been a lot of really great things said, and yeah, just to kind of hear all of that, and then maybe I'll just say that I have sort of post McGill, or like being within that program, I think I really felt like I was still finding my feet in terms of my practice and knowing how my practice is valuable, and learning for me as an artist, you know, that I don't have to make my practice fit an institution, that an institution can grow and fit my practice. And I think that was the process that I was going through at McGill, which really like still, you know, informs so much of how I work now. So, yeah.
Thanks so much, Claudia.
Actually, I was going to ask a question very similar to a question that's just been posted, because I was very interested. I mean, obviously, this amazing dialogue across first 3 artists and another 3, and something that, you know, you always imagine that this is going to happen all the time, and it doesn't. People are very busy as people are learning their own piece and finding their own place. So this idea of dialogue or learning across the space pretty much picks up with this one. Did you ever have a chance to meet other artists from this residency? Are you creating a community, inspire each other, cross-fertilize projects? I know a little bit about this, but maybe post either during the residency or post the residency, how has the residency had an impact on this building a community? I think it links to that question.
Don't be polite, just dive in.
Jump in.
Go, Kama.
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I mean, I think it's something for me. Like it's interesting doing a program like this one, because even if I don't get to meet the other artists, like there's something about it feels like you're in a lineage, right? Like you're part of a cohort. Like somehow there's something that's connected for me. even if I haven't met all the other artists, but I'm like, there's something of like, oh, you're doing the residency. And I think Lou and I, we had met at the gallery once, and we had that moment of like, oh, you're in this, I did it last year, you know, like it was an instant moment of connection. So I think there's that. I mean, I follow the work of everybody. I've had the chance to collaborate on a project with Laurie Beavis and Maria Escura a couple of years ago. So we continued a bit more, but we were also in the same year. Laurie and I were of the same cohort. So we continued a bit of a project together. But more than anything, I follow, like, you know, for me, those are like potentials that are there. Like, I think there's always like a form of kin, so to speak, when you've gone through the same program, even if you're in different years. And for sure, I do follow everybody's work. Like, I do, every artist that went through, like, for me, I follow their work, even if we haven't collaborated. But yeah, that in a way, there's like a sense of like collegiality, community that I feel. Like, there's a sense of connection that I feel with everybody, even if I haven't met them.
I would say that I feel basically the same. And I guess that one thing from my period at the Lantz, at the archive, and everything I've seen there, I've learned a lot about other kinds of art. And one thing that happened is, for me, is that I feel from the people that I knew, is that we cheer for each other. It's like we support each other. We know that we want them to be successful, whatever they do. If we know something, we remember, oh, this person works with that, so let me invite this artist to be part of this project. And I think this net, I would say, it's very, very important, because usually the artistic field, I would say in general, of course, there's exceptions, but it's solitary. I mean, we work in bubbles, and it's not easy to find connections, or connections that are not only professional connections, that connections that has a relationship. So this was one thing that was important. And the second thing that I see is that, at least for me, I see that the students, they also get connected with art. They know more about exhibitions. They know more about dances. We have these connections. We follow up. We see if everybody's okay, if we're gonna have a coffee together, or if we're gonna. This person is showing this work in this museum, in this gallery. So. And then for me, this is a very, very, very important thing, to have the students, not only the artists, but the students going together.
I agree with everything. Yeah. And it was so funny to meet Kama in the gallery and then be like, oh, yes, we have shared experience here, you know, and for better or for worse, like in all the ways that we do. But I think, like, to expand on some of what's been said and thinking about the idea of like 12 years of this, is it 12 artists? I can't remember but, you know, thinking about the legacy of this program and like like the artists that have come through it, and the breadth of practice that has come through the program, and the different ways that people work who have come through the program. Like, I think what excites me the most is that there's a way of looking at all of these different practices, and the ways that these serve community, and the ways that they that these different practices make place and like connect people together. And I think it's really exciting for me to look at a practice like Debbie's and say, like, here is a practice that is very far from my own in lots of ways, but that still holds some similar values, some shared values, and the same with Kama's and the same with Aaron's. And, you know, I think of the people like Laurie's who's been through this program and think, you know, that we do share a kind of like a connection through that. So yeah, I guess that for me is what's the most interesting, is like when I know someone has done this program, I'm like, you also are thinking about how to bring people into your practice in different ways. So yeah. And when I'm asked by people if they want to apply, that's what I say. It's like, that's what this project like did for me. And so.
Thank you so much. That's amazing.
May I add just one thing that I think is important? I used to say this when I was there, that just remembered now here in Lu and Kama. I think the artists in residence, it's very educational for the artists too. I mean, it's not only to be in a place where the students are the goal. I think we change a lot. We learn. For me, everything I say, I would say we, but of course I'm saying based on my experience, is that we learn also how to have frames, because we are kind of crazy. Some of us are just go and think and create. And when we are in the creative process, we go and go and go. I remember when I was creating the choreography for the project, I didn't sleep for 1 week. I mean, the middle of the night, okay, let's do this step, let's do this, let's work on this. And then it's important also, it's a both sides educational way, I would say. I grew up a lot with this residence, and I said that was me, that I have to thank the residents for everything that I had the opportunity to leave, all the nice people I had the opportunity to be with, to learn with, and it's a both hands. And then it's very, very important. This program is fantastic.
That's such a beautiful way, Debbie, of illustrating what you mentioned earlier, the Freirean teacher-learner and learner-teacher, that sense that it's really not a one-way street, but that it's dialogical and hopefully benefits all those who are participating. I'm just have an eye on the time. I don't see any more urgent questions. I had just a couple of connections that I wanted to make, and I wanted to close with a quote that one of you articulated, but all of you said in your own ways, if that makes sense. We started out with the first presentation and continued throughout. We were talking about presence, talking about space, talking about compassion and connection. That was, I think, present across all of the three talks. I love the introduction in different ways of the notion of urgency, political urgency, the pandemic, obviously, creative urgency, and availability. And what I was thinking about when I was listening to all of you is just this incredibly attentive, this acute listening and noticing, and then questioning, and then connecting, and then articulating, and then noticing some more, and this sort of really vibrant process that artists, I think, are deeply involved in a kind of a cyclical nature. And I got that sense from the various projects that you shared with us today. I wanted to just close our session with a quote. Kama, you said, after that, so you were talking about My Body is the Ocean, and you're talking about your time at McGill, but you said, after that, this project took roots and became so many other things. And I wrote that down because I've been thinking a lot in the last while about Pauline and about her vision and about what she hoped for through the artists in residence, through all of the funding of the various projects that she gave us as a gift in the faculty. But I just wanted to wrap up by acknowledging that I think Pauline would be so thrilled to think that the work that she was able to make possible through the artists in residence was somehow fertile and rich, and took the artists beyond into more work, and had that kind of ongoing life, not only for the artists, but for all of us who have been part of it with you, and for the students, and for the instructors and the professors and the faculty of education community who have experienced all of those things. So yeah, after that, this project took roots and became so many other things. I just want to thank all of you for incredible. I have, I think, 7 pages of notes with arrows and connections and circles, and so many things to think about and to follow up. It's just been absolutely spectacular to hear about, to revisit what you did with us at the faculty, and to hear about the work you're doing. And we wish you all the very best. Thank you so much for being here with us. I guess my official wrap up, I'll just check the chat. Yes, lots and lots of thank yous. So we are out of time. Thank you to the presenters. Thank you to all of you who have been here, who are here with us today. We have 3 more panels tomorrow. We would love it if you would join us. The Zoom link is the same. I'll just quickly touch on that. Tomorrow at 10 Eastern Time, we'll have Amélie Brandamour, Nadia Moss, and Johnny Tai Lotus presenting. At noon Eastern Time, we'll have presentations from Laurie Beavis, Maria Ezcura, and Victoria Stanton. And finally, wrapping up the symposium at 2 o'clock tomorrow Eastern Time, we'll have a talkback panel where the respondents who attended each presentation will share their reflections with Dr. Claudia Mitchell. For information about all of that, you can go to the symposium website, which we'll be posting in the chat. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful day.